So I would like to introduce our panel today from our engineering and operations team. The first one to introduce is Andy. Andy Gooding. So Andy is our VP of engineering, and he joined us in 2011. So, please. If you can say a few words.
I can say a few words, yes. I've been here from pretty much the beginning, other than Srini and Brian. I think Sunil, who you'll meet next. And
Sorry, can you use the mic?
Is the mic not working?
Supposed to have mic on.
Can we turn the mic on? No.
hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been at Aerospike from the beginning, unless you count the year or two that Srini and Brian were operating by themselves. I was one of the very original hires. So I had the fun privilege of seeing it grow from 6 people in a teeny little one-room office to having a user conference where it's actually our user conference, which to me is sort of amazing because I still remember the scene from years ago when it was just 6 of us in a room. So yeah, it's been a heck of a journey, as Srini was saying in his intro this morning. I watched it every step of the way and survived it, helped us survive it, and still here. It just looks better every year.
Okay, the next is Sunil, who joined us just before I think Andy joined us, 2011. He heads our team in Bangalore. So Sunil, if you want to come over and say a few words and then sit down.
Yeah, so I think when I joined, it was like one customer we had, so I was crazy enough to join the job. And like we grew from like one customer to 150 customers now, so that was hell of a ride.
The next one I'm going to introduce is Tendjoukian, who is our VP of operations. You might have met him if or heard, written to him if you ever did a support ticket, opened a support ticket. He joined us in 2013, I believe. Want to say a few words?
Yeah, so I joined much later than the other guys here on the panel. So it's going to be almost 5 years, and it's also been great, and it's really awesome to put faces on all the voices and emails that we keep receiving, and it's been awesome supporting all of you.
And the fourth person in the panel is Raj Kumar Iyer. Raj. He's from Bangalore. He joined us a little bit after Andy did, in 2011 also. And Raj is, why don't you introduce yourself, Raj?
Yeah, hi guys.
Is it audible?
Yes, we're good.
Yeah, hi, I'm Raj. I work from Bangalore office and I've been in Aerospike forever. So it's nice to, as Andy explained, right? From the point where you would do the, you woke up at night to do support to a point where you do user conference is an awesome feeling. So good to be there and talk to you guys.
So the way we're going to do this is I'm going to kick off a question each to the 4 of them, and then I'll have any of you in the audience ask questions of the team. You can ask anything pretty much technical. You can ask non-technical things too, but may not be that useful. But we can answer anything you want based on our experiences. My first question to Andy is, Andy, we've heard from so many customers today about how our product has helped them work at scale. So if you could kind of share with our audience here your thoughts on how we actually build our software to enable such mission critical and extreme uses of the software. I think if you could do that, that'd be great.
Yeah, we pretty good at it. Our product, of course, is really focused, and the code base is really focused. So it is really a challenge to develop a bunch of features, especially all at the same time. In fact, most of the time we just really can't do that. If we had, if there were 3 features that we wanted to do, A, B, and C, and we tried to do them at the same time, we'd pretty much be tripping over, they'd all be tripping over each other, and it would be a merge heck. So a large challenge is traffic control, and so we have to sequence a lot of things. And, years ago we would just sequence them as they arose organically and just do them. But what we found was that by just immediately focusing on the feature you're doing, you're bending the code base slightly, and it may not be in a way favorable to the next feature or the feature after that. So one thing that has really helped us now is that we've started trying to look very far ahead. Like not speculatively far ahead, but looking at the things that we know are on our roadmap. And instead of just picking one and doing it, we try to look 2 or 3 features out and try to look at all the different ways we could do all of them and how are they going to be synergistic with each other or how are they going to interfere with each other. And what we find is if we pay a lot of attention to that we can often find synergies or ways to do them or the right sequence in which to do them that they all come in much better than they would have if you just did them randomly. So yeah, one big thing is we just look very far ahead. There are some great examples of this coming up. We have a release coming out in a week or so which is fantastic for its own reasons, but it also contains things that really are setups for literally 2 or 3 releases down the road that we thought really hard about in detail, before doing this release to try to bring the right stuff forward to sort of strategically position this very tight, involved code base to accommodate things going forward. So yeah, that's the first thing, is just looking ahead or trying to look very far ahead to make things have the best synergy that they can. The other thing is that the second big thing is that we've adopted development methodologies where we pay a lot of attention upstream in the development process to try to avoid bugs. And this means it's just not like we do more testing or whatever. We do some things that initially, when you're doing them, the average engineer might find very frustrating. We do a lot of pair coding, and sometimes for some critical features it will be even more than 2 people. We'll have 3 people be in there line by line while something is being laid in. And so this early effort, once you get used to it, we now have ample evidence that doing it is working because it pays off down the line. Like even if we have a simple slip and introduce a bug that our own QA finds, sometimes that can hold us up for days. I think the last such bug I let slip into QA, it took 2.5 days to figure out because it's a very involved system and reproducing it's hard. And so that's a big cost, but of course it gets even worse if we ship it. It's bad for you guys if you get something with a bug. This is your database after all. You don't really want to have bugs. But then it's really bad for us because we're very small still, and if we end up spending 80% of our developers' time in this rearguard action trying to cover issues that we've shipped and fix them, then we kind of grind to a halt in terms of going forward. So we found that going sort of slower in the development process or adopting methodologies that may seem tedious, if we do it right, it ends up really paying off down the road because we just find that far fewer bugs get into QA and far fewer bugs get through QA out into the releases, and then we just spend much less time dealing with them. We have a great operations team here. That's another reason we're free with a very small development team to keep pressing forward. But a big part of it is too that we're laying our own groundwork by minimizing the number of issues that we have to deal with in customer production environments. So yeah, it's really a combination of those two things: the methodology, the focus on upstream and development, bug avoidance, and trying to look 2 or 3 features ahead to see how synergistic we can make them, or what's the best order to do them in, or whether we can bring a piece of one of them forward and do it now, and it will help another one. So yeah, I'd say those are the main things.
Thank you, Andy. Now on to Sunil. It's a 2-part question for you, Sunil. Sunil is a database person from before. So he worked at, I believe, Sybase. So he joined Aerospike so he can build a brand new database. So the 2-part question is as follows. Number 1 is, given what you wanted to do and why you joined us, how has just characterized the journey, and you can use the product pieces you've been responsible for to illustrate it. And the second is, give us some thoughts on the distributed development process. Right? We have a team in Bangalore, and we had it from the beginning. We had it by the time when we founded it. We had Andy here, we had Sunil there in 2011. So give us your thoughts on it, given you're in a different time zone. Thank you.
How it started, it was a good coincidence, I would say. When I was at Sybase, I worked on different types of databases. It was monolithic single machine servers. Then we started a shared disk cluster, and I learned what not to do. So shared disk thing was kind of a disaster, things don't scale. So then first time I looked at the white paper written by Brian and said okay, this is the things that we do in Aerospike, and everything resonated with me, which I was fighting at Sybase, that we should not do this, we should not do this. So that really impressed me and really motivated me to join. Okay, so in terms of managing distributed teams, I will not realize the matter, it is a hard problem. But what really helped was a good start. So I think we were joined at the hip, in the first 2 years, we were traveling. First 2 years, I think we traveled almost 4 times a year. So that really helped us start very, with the same mindset and things like that. So the running joke in the company was maybe when we hire people, we should torture them to see if they will survive the sleep deprivation test and travel 24 hours. So
like an ACT test for employees.
So yeah, so that really helped a lot. After that, so then we could take on individual projects. The way we would try to split the work is try to not have too much dependencies across geography. So that helps, and of course there will be few things which you cannot avoid. So for that we sync up frequently and things like that. So I think the initial 2 years really key to even develop this distributed teams.
Thank you. I just want to add a couple of comments. One thing I remember is when in the early years, whenever the Bangalore team used to visit the US, I would insist that we work a weekend in the US. I still remember there was almost a revolt at some point when everybody revolted on it, because for 2 reasons. One is the people visiting don't get to take any days off and go see California. And the people in California was like, man, I got to work. So every time the Bangalore team was coming, hey, can you not come this weekend? It became, but we kind of ended up doing that a while ago. But I was kind of, but again, the point is you work closely together. And truthfully, the second point is a serious one. We continue to work on this. Okay, so we still continue to work on how, because our product is very hard to separate into independent pieces. So we have to work closely together in the core. And it is a work in progress, and we intend to make it work. And that's part of it is from the beginning, we always intend to make it work. And so we keep working on it. It's not like it's done, it's an ongoing process. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Thank you. And now to Meher. Meher's question is very simple. Whenever I go and meet customers, sometimes customers are, the product is working great. Sometimes we do have bugs, sometimes, and then, but I always hear, independent of whatever they say about the product, they say, your support team is awesome. And this is people all over the world. My question to Mayor is, how do you do it?
Well, first, it's a whole team effort, and it goes beyond support, obviously. I mean, the whole company. We work very closely with all our developers and everybody, basically. So it's not just one team. But two things to answer. One, obviously, is to be very responsive. So for that, we have a team, obviously in Bangalore, in Mountain View, but also in London. We have also one team member in Houston, helps us a bit in the morning hours when the East Coast wakes up. So being, responsive, triaging cases very efficiently, and also having, proper handovers between those different time zones for cases that require, continuous attention. But maybe more important, what we try to do as much as possible is not to just go and focus on, oh, this is a solution to your problem, just go do these things and it's just going to work. To really partner with the customer to make sure they understand. A lot of times we're not even sure, right, if we're going to be able to solve the problem because it may be related to our product, it may not be. It's a complex distributed system. So we want to, as quickly as possible, engage with sharing what we see, getting the trust, right, of the user on the other side. Make sure he's going to trust us that we may recommend something which is not going to help, and that they understand why we made that recommendation based on what we have observed, so that if we have to make another second or third recommendation, we still have that trust going forward. So that requires not only understanding the product, but also being able to explain it, being able to explain the symptoms and the data that we see that you guys share with us.
Thank you. Now, to Raj, I first have to apologize because Jeff Boone was supposed to be in the panel, but Jeff's not well, so he's recovering. So I just pulled Raj aside. Can you please, represent Jeff? Jeff and Raj work together on the ecosystems project. But I have a question for Raj, which is, it's again a two-part question. I guess there's a pattern here. Everybody in Bangalore, I ask a two-part question. Because you have a certain perspective, which I would like you to share with the people here. And the first part is, you had worked in the core server for a while, and then you've been working in ecosystems, right? So talk a little bit about that kind of switching, which you did. And then give your perspective, since you also came from a database company. Give your perspective of what you wanted to do when you came into Aerospike, and what you have seen here in the first 7 years, I guess.
Sure. So I'll start with the second question first. Okay. So you don't get a chance to build databases that often. Okay. So I spent 6-8 years in Sideways. I was a colleague of Sunil there, building databases, and then to figure out what is the next thing that is happening about 10 years back was fundamentally this new wave of NoSQL kind of system. So that was something which I look at as a challenge. And when you come in and see these systems, the pattern that you see basically is fundamentally two pieces drive these technology. One is the underlying systems like SSD, on which Aerospike is heavily bet on, and other parts is the use cases which come up. So when you talk to people, you realize that it's not the technology which is getting older. It's just that more use cases coming in. So you need better storage subsystems and new databases. So that was what enthused me to join and build these systems. And now the second question. Of course, experience is awesome because it's like you come in, you don't know what's the problem, because every day you talk to a customer, they have a different problem to be solved. And it's also maturing. Generally, the theory in database industry is it takes 10 years to build anything meaningfully okay. So we are still at 7th year or something, 8th year on this one. It's still a long way to go to build a database which is actually to a level where all the features and all the systems are there. That's the fun part of doing this. And secondly, first, I spend a lot of time writing server code, and then the natural progression is you talk to customers, you try to understand what is the problem. Then that's a simple question. What do you think? How big is our support team? And those people who experienced it, it's about 5 to 7 people. If you see 5 to 7 people trying to help a lot of customers, and in the conditions where Aerospike gets used as a front-end system, and anytime it goes down, it's a problem. Then you realize that you have to become very, very good at not putting in a bug like Andy would solve a problem. Like the system is very stable. And the second level of problem that has started happening is if it happens, so how quickly you can identify and make sure that it's triaged and solved. So we have spent a lot of time trying to understand this. So that segues into the point that the team that I actually work with right now is tools and ecosystem team. The tools, we actually build a lot of tools to figure out what is the problem and identify the root causes very quickly, so that even with 5 people you can support 150 customers, or a very critical situation where these tools help us identify or predict what could happen with these systems running at a high scale. On the ecosystem side, as we grow more and more into this enterprise companies, we realize that, as somebody was explaining in the talk, I think Srini at the beginning of the day, right? Once Aerospike becomes system of truth, you need to be able to inject out this information out into much more wider systems, because there are a lot of data engineering systems that are running. So for those, we are building up a lot of connectors and stuff around it, like table connectors, or maybe Kafka connectors and stuff like that. So that is the stuff that we are actually thinking about to make sure that this can. We are just a small wheel in the entire system of solutions, and we are trying to figure out how to make sure that we connect very well with the other parts of the system. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. So now I'd like to throw it open to questions from the audience. That was in fact. So anybody has any question? They do.
If they can raise their hands.
Yeah. Okay, just raise your hands and a mic will appear. This gentleman will bring it in, I guess. Oh, there's a question here.
So like earlier in the morning, it was mentioned that Aerospike initially started as basically like a read-through, or as a cache, a highly available persistent cache. Are there still kind of cache use cases for Aerospikes? Maybe you have a petabyte stored on HDFS or S3 or somewhere, and you don't want to pay for a petabyte cluster because you don't actually need most of it. How does that, like, how do you do that? Like, what's the kind of approach to that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, Aerospike's always going to be usable as a cache if that's what it calls for. That's what your situation calls for. As we build out features, part of my original thing, Srini's first question to me, challenge is how do you build all of this stuff out and not degrade what was the original core functionality. And we're doing that, and we're not just not degrading it, we're actually making it perform better and faster too. So yeah, it's always going to be there if you need it that way. But we're just trying to make it so that we cover other cases too. And perhaps there are going to be situations where, again, there's synergy. A customer doesn't just get to use one database for multiple things, but they can use literally the same deployment for multiple things. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, there's probably always going to be a use case or some situation in which that we work great as a cache and we don't really need to be any more than that. But at the same time, we see a lot of cases where we know we can do more than that, and we're trying to do that, and we're doing it. We're desperately trying to do it without degrading the original functionality or the original niche. And we're doing a very good job of it. We're not just not degrading, it's just getting better all the time. It's sucking less every release.
That's quoting a customer.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a good customer of ours, a good customer of ours who said, and I actually remember this, I wrote it on the board at the time, a few years ago. He's still a customer. He said his whole motto was suck a little less every day. Question there. We need a mic. Yeah, thank you.
This morning, Brian Volkowski mentioned that you guys are going to, I'm from Intel, by the way. This morning, Brian mentioned you guys are going to be 2 times more efficient on flash storage than you are today. Could you give us a little bit of a thought, Andy, on what you're going to do there to be even more efficient this besides just sequential writing at 128K?
Yeah, so mileage may vary, but what he's alluding to is the time finally became right for us to overhaul our storage format. And this is really mostly about a dramatic reduction in overhead. When these guys originally wrote the storage format, they were in a rush and they did something that was
It's a nice
simpler
way of
and
saying
worked.
the
Yeah.
code was not that great.
Well, no, it worked. It worked.
It did work.
I don't know, I'd say if there's any mistake you made, it was trying to be too speculative as to what new overhead you might need. And, but now years into it, we have a really clear idea what's changing and what's not. And so we decided finally the time is now to redo the storage format. So the factor of 2, that's for users with small records. In fact, technically it can be more than a factor of 2. Like a tombstone now that everybody knows, for people who use durable leaps, it takes 128 bytes, they'll go down to 48. That can happen for a record too if you zip one bin with an integer with a nice short set name, or you're in single bin configuration. So yeah, if you have small records, you're going to see a dramatic impact. You might literally use half the drive space that you used to. If your average record size is 10K, it won't be that big a deal. But along with just the capacity comes performance, because we do our own defragging, the storage layer, and so forth. And so if you really get a factor of 2 compression, it simply slows down all your background drive I/O rates for defrag. That will literally cut in half, and the impact it will have will cut in half. Your memory cache performance will be better. I don't know if a lot of people know about our post-write queue feature, the thing where we keep recently written stuff in RAM for a while, even after it's flushed to drive, after you've written it. Suddenly, if you have small records, that factor of 2 without spending any more memory means that the range of your post-write queue just doubled. So there are all these collateral performance benefits that come along with just removing this overhead.
That's a small cache, that's like a few meg usually?
Wait, it's configurable.
Yeah.
People use it up to a few gig, typically, because they're using it in a system where you don't have your data in memory. The index is the only thing taking up RAM. And so you can often afford, at least since you have a really good control over how much memory we're consuming, they know they can spend a few gig on it. And it matters. If they can get half their reads hitting that cache, then that's a lot less drive I/O. So yeah, this, as well as giving you back all the capacity, will also double the range of that. It'll have the background rates of drive large block operations that we defrag with, and it'll actually be slightly better in CPU cache related things, reading records. If something fits in 64 bytes that used to take 128 or 256. So yeah, I think it's going to be. I'm excited about 4.2. It's going to be probably our best performance-oriented release for a while. And yeah, I was in this room earlier, I guess, when Tim Smith from AppNexus was saying we're doing all the calculations about what capacity we'll need. I had to nudge Brian and say, somebody better tell him the math has changed. So yeah, it'll be good.
So will 4.2 also have that index on block SSD?
One more month, 4.3. Hopefully one more month. No promises, but yeah.
You heard it here first.
Yeah.
From the man.
In 4.2, as I was saying as part of my answer to the first question, contains a lot of things that have nothing to do with the storage format change, but we got by looking ahead, specifically to 2 features, the index on SSD and these secondary index improvements that we have planned after that. So this was one of those cases where looking ahead and planning didn't just allow us to not corner ourselves and lay the good groundwork so that we didn't interfere we think we'll be able to lay those in cleanly. We actually got collateral benefit. Like we spotted something that we knew we were going to have to do for our secondary index project, but we realized that, wait, that would actually work. We could use that in our index on device project, and then we finally realized, actually, wait a minute, if we do that piece now, suddenly we can make our regular ordinary fast restart, or what I used to call warm restart with just the current deployment. We can improve that. So we did it, and we find that now we've got about a factor of 5 improvement in warm restart time. So people who used to take 3, 4, 5 minutes, they'll now be sub 1 minute again. And that's a big deal operationally for people. We hope you'll love it. But it's an example of us spotting something by looking 2 features down the road and deciding that there's no reason not to do that piece now, give it some airtime, get the collateral benefit from it, and we start bending the code base to accommodate the future features. So that's one less thing to do when we're going to build them in. But yeah, index on device, hopefully June, we'll see. Sometimes, of course, we're up a little optimistic, but looks good right now.
Right. I mean, one side point there is Tim Smith, from AppNexus, he talked about hours to restart to sub-minute. We've come a long way in the product. More questions? Oh, there's one here. Another one behind.
Hello? Hello?
We can hear you.
Yep. So I have a question about the client library. I know the source is available, but we have found it somewhat opaque. And I'm just wondering if there was any plans to expose some metrics for the thread pool or connection pools and all the things that the handle clients.
Okay. Does anybody want to take this?
Sure.
Brian wants to take it. Okay.
Well, kind of is a product
You
question.
use the mic.
Can I use a mic? Come on.
Otherwise, people can hear.
Okay. The short answer is great idea. Which client?
Great idea. Which client?
C and Java.
C and Java. What do you want us to hook it up to in terms of recording these things?
Don't care as long as it's available.
Right, because usually there's not a separate process, right? When you're running a server process, there's more normal ways of monitoring.
Sure, but the client library handles things internally in a way that doesn't expose it to the application.
So you'd like basically an API and then you can hook it up? Okay,
Because
I
that
see.
causes us problems because we can't react to the state. And the
So what do you think,
intention is
Brian?
The client library
You
does.
down with that?
Yeah.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay.
Okay, so we just got the product requirements. We've just transmitted it to engineering. Now I just need to take that. That's how we roll.
Brian wasn't using his name in the third person. There's another Brian who's a client.
That's the guy who writes that piece.
Yeah, it's a good thing you answered. I was just going to say, come on, make it open source, go for it.
Well, I think he was right. The code is somewhat opaque. That was very kind.
Okay, so you can meet Brian at some point and talk to him directly too. So, any other questions? Oh, there's one here.
Yeah, so I'm interested in your server engineering, since you're sharing details, are you using any special kernel features or it's all user space code?
Versus user.
No, I think we operate in user space quite happily.
So are you bypassing kernel or with just a normal user space?
No, we don't really bypass the kernel unless you consider something like using direct I/O, for flash storage, bypassing the kernel. Depends on your definition.
So like you are using your SSP as just raw storage, like.
Yeah.
And other users support like you have your own malloc, or you have your own.
J-email.
We
Oh, the
use JML.
yeah, we do use the JEmalloc library.
Anything else you could share?
No, that's probably the biggest third-party piece that, the least core.
But I do want to add one historical fact, which some of our folks may remember. We did, in the early days, use a special kernel build. It cost us a near outage at Appnexus. It didn't go down, but the kernel was buggy. And we just went away from that.
What drove that decision, Shane, to go with a custom kernel?
I don't know, it was early days. We were like foolhardy. No good answer. I mean, we thought that solved the problem, but it actually created a problem, which didn't exist before. At that point, we just ran away from that. And then after that, we never do special kernels and all that stuff. Whatever short-term advantage you get is like, you lose in uptime. Literally, you lose in uptime. And if for those who are interested, since it's a tech session, I'll go into this, what actually happened. So there was this bug in one of these kernels. I think Linus decided to put some optimizations in one day and released the kernel. It was very fast compared to others. But after, 364 days, 240 days, or something ridiculous. There was some counter. After that 6 months, if there was a process which was up for the entire period, the kernel will just freeze. Our process never goes down.
But the kernel.
This literally happened on a Memorial Day weekend. I was on call, and then somebody from Appnexus, I think it was Mike Nolet, the CTO of Appnexus, he's taken the Memorial Day thing because his guy was flying for Memorial Day weekend, so he took it in the morning, and so I get a call from Mike going like, hey Srini, the note just went down. I already had gotten an alert, I was on it. And then I go like, which is fine, notes go down. 20 minutes later, another one goes down. And now I'm worried, so I call Brian. Brian's furiously Googling. There was an error, right? And this happens, right? And then another one goes down in half an hour. Now it's serious. It's Memorial Day and it's ruined, first of all. That's okay, that's gone. But now the service is going to go down. And then Brian, I was trying to Google some funny way, but Brian's like really aggressive. He just put the whole damn error message into Google, and Google said, this error has been seen elsewhere. What the error was exactly this. Our process had run for the amount of time after the kernel had started. I mean, the Linux box had come up. We started, Aerospike daemon. It had run like 6 months. I don't know exactly what it was, and it just died. So the reason it was going down in 20 minutes and 30 minutes was because this was the time when they were started. We had a rolling upgrade of the previous version. So it was going down exactly 6 months. So the service still stayed up because so long as the restart came up. Now that we knew what the problem was, we knew that we had another 6 months of reprieve to fix it. but it was like bizarre. So just to give you an idea, so don't use custom kernels.
I really know what you're doing.
We have time probably for one more question. Okay, we do have a question, that's great.
I understand that you will have an update about the storage format. So do you have any plan to update benchmarking, so ACT, the IO size, anything else?
You're talking about ACT?
Yes.
Yeah, the size that writes is configurable anyway. So, I mean, I don't know. We set the default. It's not really based on our storage format. We just picked a number that seemed to be representative of the the average that most people run. I think it's about 1.5K. So, yeah, I suppose I could lower that accordingly, but that was just a random number anyway. And my expectation is, since most people use ACT just to compare apples to apples, if they really want to wonder about what performance is with different sizes, they would configure it. But I'm probably just going to leave the same default because people are just used to those numbers. And yeah, I don't think we'll affect ACT unless there's huge popular demand.
I have a follow-up. that question. For index on device, I think we should do something on the ACT, right? To model that workload.
Yeah, we have.
Okay.
Oh wait, index on device?
Okay,
Yeah, no, yeah, you're right.
You should
You're right.
mention that.
That's right. That's probably the next thing. We already added a bunch of modes to it recently to model our commit to device mode of our strong consistency mode within a mode. But yeah, probably the next big thing would be to model the well, we'll see what makes sense, but yeah, we'll definitely be thinking about it with respect to the index on device.
Are you gonna model that to 512 byte or 4096?
Well, I'm sure it'll be configurable, but
Yeah, well, you only have 2 block modes, right? I mean, we can't go to 64 byte on NVMe.
yeah.
That's my.
Well, index on device is it is going to be centered around 4K stuff, even if the minimum IO allowed direct IO size is 512. It's a long story, but yeah, don't worry. We'll figure out whatever makes sense, whatever we think that will make the most sense.
Okay, we have time for one quick question. Final one. Going once. Okay, did you get it? Venkat.
There is a lot of discussion on the secondary indexes. We are supporting secondary indexes. Recently, we can define indexes on a list object also. What is the roadmap of secondary indexes? What kind of features you would be adding? In addition to this, are you currently supporting anything else?
Okay, that's a good question. The question is on secondary indexes roadmap. We're going to talk about it at the session on 1, but I'm going to give you a preview since you asked the question. The storage format changes that Andy talked about are a prerequisite for doing anything with secondary indexes in terms of efficiencies. And we will get into, so we're going to do the index on device with the primary index first, and then a whole bunch of other work we haven't scheduled yet, but that is the intention, is to move forward on improving secondary indexes, correctness, performance, adding more features. I mean, that will come over the next 12 to 18 months. But that is so the first steps are being taken right now to enable us to be able to do that. I know it's not a full answer, but there'll be more at the roadmap session at 1 o'clock.
Without promising any timelines, maybe. So, like one thing like we want to do, like definitely in second index is the warm start ability of second index. I think a lot of people are afraid to use SNX because it doesn't warm start.
So thank you for attending this session. Appreciate all the questions, and see you at the rest of the conference. And you can please, you know these people, so just go.
Yeah, you're still allowed to ask us questions.
Ask them questions, whatever you want. Any discussions are welcome. Thank you very much.